Hey there, everybody. Welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani. We are live here again Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to do our weekly book club. We are not live on TikTok or Instagram today. Today is only Facebook and YouTube. And we are still doing Tuesdays until the new date is announced. Ooh. And we are on chapter 43 of our book, Nosso Lar. So let me begin sharing screen. Okay. I'm going to do that. And we're going to put us down here. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Let's, is there a way I can do it like this? Okay, well, that's cool. Would be nice if I could also, oh shit. My bad. There we go. Okay. Is that better looking to you guys than the other way? Like, I feel like that's too small for you guys. So with that said, I want to go back to this. I think this is a little bit better. There we go. There we go. So an informal conversation. Let's get it started. The festive atmosphere still prevailed at the Ministry of Regeneration, despite the departure of the governor and his closest advisors. There was much talk about the ceremony just over, and hundreds in response to the appeal of our spiritual leader were volunteering for the strenuous work of defense. I sought Tobias to consult him about the possibility of following their example, but my generous brother smiled at my innocence and said, "Andre, you are just beginning a new job. Don't be in a hurry to ask for more responsibilities. The governor has just told us that there will be work for everybody. Don't forget that our chambers of rectification are centers of active work, both day and night, and that as 30,000 workers will be detailed for permanent vigilance, there will be great gaps in the rear guard which will have to be filled somehow." Perceiving my disappointment, my kindly companion added, good-humoredly, of course, and after a short pause, "Cheer up. You can always enroll yourself in a course against fear. Believe me, it will do you a lot of good." Meanwhile, Lysias, who had come to the festival in the delegation from the Ministry of Assistance, sought me, and with Tobias's permission, I followed him for a quiet talk. "Have you met Minister Beneventus of Regeneration?" he inquired, "the one who just arrived from Poland?" "I'm afraid I haven't had the pleasure." "Well, let's go find him then. I'll introduce you to him." Lysias continued sharing with me the vibrations of his great brotherly heart. I've had the honor of counting him among my personal friends for a long time. In a few minutes, we found ourselves in a large green park where Benevitus usually worked. Several groups of visitors were talking here and there under the wide spreading trees, leading me to the largest gathering where the minister was exchanging impressions with several friends. Lysias introduced me with the kind references. Benevitus welcomed me amiably and cordially, included me in his circle. And as the conversation proceeded, I noticed that the topic under discussion was a situation on Earth. So painful, the scenes we witnessed. Accustomed as we were to peace in America, none of us had imagined the tremendous difficulties in the work of spiritual aid on the battlefield of Poland. All is darkness and difficulty there. One cannot expect sparks of faith either from aggressors or from the majority of victims who give themselves up entirely to hideous impressions. Our incarnate brothers offer us no help whatsoever, but merely consume our strength. I must say that since the beginning of my work, I have never seen such terrible mass suffering. And did the delegation remain there for long? One of those present asked with interest. As long as we could, replied the minister. The head of the expedition, our colleague from assistance, thought it advisable that we apply ourselves solely to the task so that we might take full advantage of the opportunity. Excuse me. I'm afraid we are far from possessing the extraordinary capacity of resistance of those devoted spirit workers on duty there. All the first aid services are working efficiently there, in spite of the suffocating atmosphere and saturated with destructive vibrations. The battlefield, invisible to our earthly brothers, is a real hell of indescribable proportions. Never does the human spirit show so obstinately the conditions of a fallen soul, with all its diabolical features, as in war. I saw intelligent and cultured men apply themselves with the utmost care to localizing districts of peaceful activity, to carry out what they call direct hits. Bombs of high explosive power destroy the patient labors of years. The pestilent emanations of hatred mingled with the poisonous fluids of guns render any service of aid almost impossible. However, what distressed us the most was the pitiful conditions of the military aggressors. As they were cut off from their fleshy forms, most of them passed over under the influence of the forces of darkness and ran away from missionary spirits, calling them all ghosts of the cross. And weren't any rescued? Some interrupted. The minister answered significantly. It will always be possible to help peaceful lunatics in their home. But what can we do with the ferociously insane but shut them up in an asylum? There was nothing to be done with such entities but leave them to the abyss of darkness, where they will, in due course, be compelled to change their mental attitude and open their minds to a new trend of thought. So it's only just that the assistance patrols limit their rescue to those with some probability of assimilating help from above. Thus, my dear friends, you see that on every account our observations were sad indeed. Availing himself of the pause in the conversation, one member of the group remarked, "Lack of religious preparation, my friends," declared Benevitus. "A cultivated intelligence is not enough. Man must, above all, enlighten his spirit in things eternal. All creeds are holy in their fundamentals, and their representatives only carry out a divine mission when they teach the truth of God. They'll never be able to quench the spiritual thirst of civilization if they drift into political or worldly channels. Without the divine breath, religious personalities may inspire respect and admiration, but never faith and trust." "What about spirit communication?" someone asked abruptly. "Didn't its first manifestations take place in America and Europe over 50 years ago? Isn't that new movement continuing to spread the eternal truths?" Benevitus smiled and gestured and went on explaining. "The Spiritist doctrine is our great hope, and in every respect the comforter for incarnate man, but its progress is still very slow. It is a divine gift which most men haven't eyes to see as yet. An overwhelmingly percentage of new adepts approach the divine source still under the influence of old religious vices. They want to reap its benefits, but are unwilling to give anything of themselves. They invoke the truth, but don't go in search of it. While the studious ones reduce mediums to mere human guinea pigs, numerous believers act like certain patients who, though completely healed, believe more in sickness than in health, never come to stand on their own feet. In a word, over there, they're after materialized spirits for the performance of transitory phenomenon, whereas here We spend our time looking for spiritualized men to carry out serious work. The minister's play on words brought a good-humored response from one of his listeners. Our task is really astronomical, he resumed gravely. However, we must bear in mind that every man is a divine seed. Let's undertake our mission with hope and optimism, for if we do our share to the best of our power, we may rest assured that God will do the rest. So that chapter was kind of tough to hear, because we're talking about casualties of war, and we're talking about perpetrators of war. And in those instances, what the minister is trying to say here is that when the ministry goes down, when the messengers go down to collect these spirits, they have to weed them out. The reality is they have to weed them out. And weeding them out simply means statistics. Who among these groups have the highest probability to be open enough and sincere enough to want to receive help from these messengers, from these spirits. And the truth of the matter is, when it comes to war, there's so much chaos happening. There's so much darkness on the battlefield. There's so much atrocities being witnessed and experienced all at the same time. And what that means is that the perpetrators, when they cross, will, like we see in this chapter, will run away from good spirits and see them only as ghosts, because they were so engulfed in the war and in perpetrating and being the offender and the aggressor, that they were consumed by the darkness. They didn't have the ability to see these messengers of light as anything other than ghosts that freak them out. And on the other side, the victims we're seeing as well being so consumed by the darkness that's on these battlefields, both in things that they're experiencing and things that they're witnessing, that when they pass, that trauma can oftentimes shock them or fear them or keep them in a catatonic state where they are unable to see these messengers and these good spirits trying to come to their aid, right? So in those instances, these aides have to make really tough decisions in terms of, who has the ability to receive them at this time. What's the probability of that? And going for those individuals. And so what he's saying here is, at the end of the day, all we can really do, and this goes for people as well, I mean, not just the spirits up here, but for people, is to do the best we can, and to do it walking in, truth, in whatever truth, in this particular case, the truth is spiritism, right? The truth is the beliefs of spiritism, spiritualism, espiritismo, all that, in that it's kind of like that last wave, right, of truth coming through, but that it's so slow. The progress of it is so slow because people get so caught up and fancified by the psychic medium aspect of it. They get so caught up in the abilities, in the healing, in the spirit communication, in the psychic development, in all that fun stuff, that they forget that spiritism isn't just that. That is one aspect of spiritism. That is one piece of it, although a very important piece of it. That's one piece of it. There is still a lifestyle that is lived and a truth that must be walked when you call yourself a psychic medium, or when you call yourself an espiritista, or when you call yourself a spiritist or a spiritualist, right? There's a path of truth that must be walked, a path of purification, if you will. And so that path, if walked rightly, and you work hard every single day just doing your best, then you can bet, in this chapter, at least what they're saying is, then you can bet that God will then do the rest. And so for example, using the same example of the war, you know, these messenger spirits coming down to do this work, all they can really do is focus on the stats, do their best, and try and retrieve as many spirits as possible to be healed. Um, and the reason why it's so difficult is because war takes out a lot of casualties, and that's a lot of spirits that you have to try and filter, and you have to try and get to before the other spirits, the other messengers of darkness, or whatever you want to call them in this particular field of study, um, before they get to them, right? Okay, so now we're on chapter 44. I'm going to take a big old gulp of water before we start again, so I'm not coughing throughout the entire chapter. So give me just 1 second. Mm. Oh my goodness. Oh my god, that water tasted so good. What, Leilani? Water tastes good? Yeah, water does taste good. If you're a water snob, you can definitely taste the differences in the different brands of water, for sure. Okay. So the dark regions. Let's talk about the dark regions. Okay. Adding to the happiness of this reunion, Lysias surprised me with his great culture and sensitivity. He played some old songs expertly on his sitar, reminding me of music on earth. What a wonderful day! More spiritual joys followed in succession, as if we were in heaven. When at last I found myself alone with my kind of friend from assistance, I tried to tell him of my impressions. Have no doubt, he said, smiling, that when we are in the company of those we love, something comforting and constructive goes on inside of us. It's the nourishment of love, Andre. When souls join in the pursuit of a common interest, their thoughts mingle, forming centers of living forces through which, from the general vibration, each member of the group will receive his share of joy or suffering. That's why, on the planet, environment is such an important factor in every man's life. We shall always feed on what we cultivate. If we give in to feelings of sadness, we shall become slaves of them. If we are unduly absorbed by the ideas of sickness, we shall suffer their consequences. There's no mystery. It's a law of life which works for good or evil. Wherever an atmosphere of brotherhood, hope, love, or joy prevails, we shall carry with us a share of those feelings. On the other hand, when we shall leave a gathering where inferior tendencies of selfishness and vanity or crime predominate, we carry those destructive vibrations of those feelings. You're right, I exclaimed. I can see that life in earthly homes is equally ruled by these principles. Whenever there is mutual understanding, life becomes a forestate of heavenly bliss. But if misunderstandings and unkindness prevail, home becomes a real hell on earth. Lysias agreed with a smile, and then took the opportunity to ask about something which had been puzzling me. The governor, in his address, had mentioned the spheres of earth, the shadowy zone, and the darkness. I had never heard any mention of darkness previously. I wondered whether that dark region could be the shadowy zone itself, where I myself had spent several wandering in dense shadows. Weren't there numerous deranged entities and patients of all sorts from the shadowy zone in the chambers? Remembering that Lysias had given me some valuable information about my own condition on my arrival in the astral city, I told him of my doubts and questions, and with a noteworthy expression on his face, my friend explained. We call the lowest regions we know darkness. Let's consider all the creatures as travelers in life. A few of them advance resolutely on the way towards the essential object of the journey. These are already spiritually evolved and conscious of the divine essence within themselves. They progress without hesitating towards their sublime goal. Most people, however, linger along the road. Numberless souls spend centuries repeating the same experience. While the former advance along straight lines, the latter travel along the same circular path, thus failing, recommencing, failing again. They are exposed to endless vicissitudes. Many will go astray in the forest of life, bewildered by the labyrinth they have themselves traced. And to that class belong the millions of beings wandering in the shadowy zones. Others, because of their selfish thoughts, walk in the dark and will often fall into precipices where they will remain for an indefinite amount of time. Do you see now? The explanation could not have been clearer. Impressed by the length and complexity of the subject, I went on with my questions. But what about those falls? Do they only happen on the earth? Are the only incarnate likely to be hurled into the abysses? For a moment's reflection, Lysias replied, "That is a good observation. Wherever he is, the spirit may hurl himself into the abyss of evil. However, in the higher spheres, the defenses are stronger. Therefore, the responsibility of the fault committed is also greater. Yet," I insisted, "I thought that a fall wouldn't be possible except on earth. It seemed to me that the divine atmosphere, the knowledge of truth and of higher aid, would be infallible protection against the poison of vanity and temptation." My friend smiled at me and went on. "The problem of temptation is more complex. The earth itself is filled with divine atmosphere, knowledge of the truth, and heavenly assistance. Yet, so many fight destructive battles while surrounded by sheltering trees and flowering fields. Many others commit murders by moonlight, insensible to the soothing language of the stars. Others oppress the weaker fellow while hearing around them sublime revelations of truth. Indeed, the earth doesn't lack expressions of divine presence." Lysias's words sank deeply into my spirit. It is true that, in general, battles are fought in spring and summer when nature displays its treasures of color, perfume, and light on the ground and in the sky, while burglary and murder are preferably committed at night when the moon and stars involve the earth in an atmosphere of celestial poetry. Most earthly tyrants are men of great culture who have turned their backs on divine inspiration. Although my conception about the spiritual fall had changed, my curiosity was not yet satisfied. Now, Lysias, could you give me an idea where the region of darkness is located? If the lower zone is connected with the human mind, where is this place of suffering and horror? "There are spheres of life everywhere," my friend resumed. "The void is merely a literary image. Everywhere there are living forces, and each species of beings moves in a special zone of life." After a short pause, during which he seemed to reflect deeply, he went on. "Now, of course, as happens to most of us, you place the sphere of life after the death of the physical body in the zones right above the surface of the globe, unaware of those below it. Yet life pulsates in the depths of the ocean and the bowels of the earth. Besides, the spirit obeys the principles of gravity just as do material bodies. The earth isn't only a field of action which may be disregarded and misused at our will. It is a live organization with certain laws which will either enslave us or set us free, according to our actions, of course. It's obvious that the soul, overburdened with faults, won't be able to ascend to the surface of the wonderful lake of life. We must bear in mind that free birds may rise to great heights. Those encircled in dense thickets of reeds will find great difficulty in taking flight, and those tied to great weights become mere slaves of the unknown. Do you grasp my point? Lysias didn't need to ask that question. All of a sudden, the immense field of the redeeming struggles in the lowermost zones of life seemed to flash before my spiritual eyes. As if in need of carefully waiting his next words, Lysias thought, and then began again. Just as we carry in the recesses of our beings the potential for good and evil, so the planet possesses both high and low expressions, with which to correct the guilty and open the passages to life eternal to those who triumph. As a doctor on earth, you learned that a man's brain contains certain elements which control his sense of direction. Now you realize that those elements aren't really physical, but spiritual in essence. If you live exclusively in the dark, you will dim your divine sense of direction and end by hurling yourself into the shadows, for abysses attract abysses. Each of us shall reach the goal towards which he directs his steps. So there's a couple of things in here. I want to see if I can find that first one. So I really loved this explanation up here. When Andre basically asked him, like, I thought that Earth was the place where spirits, if they don't do right, they're the only ones that get hurled down. Like, how is it that any of these other spirits and any of these other realms can get hurled down if, like, for example, in the astral city that they're in right now, they are surrounded by protection, they're surrounded by, divine wisdom, they're surrounded by so much that it's like, how could you fall victim to vanity or temptation? And Lysias was like, bro, earth is has no shortage of divine intervention, no shortage of wisdom and truth, no shortage of assistance from higher level spirits. The difference is that these beings here on earth get so caught up in their own bullshit that they literally are unable to witness, like they cannot grasp the divine beauty that's around them. They don't they cannot understand the wisdom that is being bestowed upon them. They can't say yes to receiving help from spirits of divine order that they don't believe in, right? So these are all, wonderful things that Lysias had said that basically was like, look, basically, and I'm going to highlight it right here. Most earthly tyrants are just men of great culture who have turned their backs on divine inspiration. And I love it. I love that that was said because he really brought it home. Now, but there is a part here that I do disagree with here. And that is, where is it? Where is it? But basically, it was the line where he said that spirits are also, that they also fall, they also submit to the laws of gravity. And unfortunately, that statement is untrue. Now, whether he was writing that as a metaphor, as in all spirits, meaning no matter which area, no matter which zone you're in, all all spirits have the capability of falling and quote unquote descending, then that's different. And he was just using gravity kind of like as a metaphor for that, the idea of the fall. But if he's using gravity as in like, you know, science, nature, and the laws of nature and all that, um, that would not be accurate. Um, and then last but not least, there was one more thing. So when he's talking about the brain here, that was the part that I was like, um, because anyone who studied neuroscience, and I had to take 2 years of neuroscience to get my psych degree. Um, and I will say this, like, yes, there are parts of the brain, like there are functions of the brain that we can't quite wrap our mind around. There is some mysteries of the brain, but for the most part, like when he talks about here like sense of direction, like for the most part we can locate the part of the brain that's firing off. We can narrow down which synapses they are, and it's common amongst all people. Like, there's definitely some, like, you can tell this was written, you know what I mean, like a long time ago. You know what I'm saying? So just keep that in mind. The music fields, chapter 45. Towards evening, Lysias invited me to accompany him to the music fields. You must relax a little, Andre, he said kindly. Seeing my reluctance, he added, I'll speak to Tobias. Narcissia herself has taken the day off to rest. Come on. By now I noticed a singular change in myself. Despite the short time I had been working there, I felt greatly attached to the chambers of rectification. Minister Genius Genesius, sorry, I always make that mistake. Minister Genesius' daily visits, Narcissia's company, Tobias's inspiring example, and my fellow worker companionship had touched me deeply. Narcissia, Celistius, and I spent our leisure time trying to make little improvements in the place, to make it more cheerful and comfortable for the patients, whom we loved with all of our hearts. Considering my relatively new position in the chambers, I needed Tobias's permission to go out, so we both went in search of him. With respectful familiarity, Lysias talked to my instructor, who readily agreed. Good idea. Andre must get acquainted with the music fields. Patting me affectionately on the back, he added, Go and enjoy yourself. Come back late in the evening whenever you like. All of our different branches of services are well attended. I followed Lysias to his home in the Ministry of Assistance. It was a true pleasure to see Laura again and to learn that Heloisa's devoted mother would be returning from Earth the following week. The house was filled with joy. Both the area indoors and the garden were more beautiful than ever. As we left, Lysias' mother took my hand and said playfully, So, from now on, the music fields will have one more regular attendant. Watch your heart. As for me, I'll stay home today. It won't be long before I find good food for my soul on earth. We departed cheerfully. The young woman accompanied Polydor and Astasius, who were talking amiably. Lysias and I took the airbus and soon disembarked in one of the squares of the Ministry of Elevation. Lysias, walking beside me, said affectionately, You are going to meet my fiancé. I told you a lot about her, or I told her a lot about you. There we go. It's funny, I observed, intrigued. The one would find engagements here as well. Well, why not? Does love dwell in the mortal body or the eternal soul? On earth, my friend, love is like a gold nugget hidden among rough stones. It is so often mixed in with people's needs, desires, lower tendencies that people rarely distinguish it from an ordinary pebble. The explanation was logical. Seeing that I agreed, Lysias continued. The betrothal is far more beautiful here in the spirit sphere because our senses aren't obscured by the veil of illusion. We show ourselves as we really are. Las, Lasinia, Lasinia and I have failed many times in the past earthly experiences. I must confess that most of the falls were due to my thoughtlessness and lack of control. When males on earth still do not fully comprehend the liberty that social laws grant us, seldom do we use it to help our spiritualization. Instead, we often abuse that freedom in a slippery descent towards animality. Women, on the other hand, have had up to now the advantage of being submitted to much sterner discipline. In transitory earthly life, they are oppressed by our tyranny and made to bear our impositions. However, we go through a readjustment of values and learn that we are never really free until we learn to obey. It seems paradoxical, but it's the perfect truth. Tell me, Lysias, have you any plans for a future earthly experience? Why, of course. I must increase my spiritual accomplishments and pay off my debts to the earth, which are still considerable. I believe Lasinia and I will return to the physical plane in about 30 years' time. Meanwhile, we intend to settle down very soon in a happy little home of our own. When we arrived at the music fields, lights of exquisite beauty bathed the park. It was like a scene from a fairy tale. Luminous fountains spouted out their waters, forming wonderful designs. The sight was quite new to me. I was about to express my admiration when Lysias spoke. Licinia always comes here with her two sisters. I hope you will make them a pleasant escort. But Lysias, I returned doubtfully, considering my old marital status, you know I am still bound to Zalia. My friend burst out laughing and added, Well, I never. No one is trying to encroach on your sense of fidelity. Yet, I don't think marriage should make you oblivious of social life. Have you forgotten how to act as a brother, Andre? Rather embarrassed, I also laughed. We were now at the entrance. Lysias approached the gate and bought our tickets. And on entering the park, I noticed a great number of people around a graceful stand where a small orchestra was playing some light music. Flower bordered paths and extended before us in several directions, leading to the park's interior. Noticing my appreciation of the songs I heard, Lysias explained, At the outer edges of the field, several styles of music are played to please the personal taste of each group of those who cannot yet understand the sublime art. In the center, though, there is a universal and divine music, the higher and sanctified art. Indeed, after walking along pleasant lanes where each flower seemed to rule in its own kingdom, I began to hear an exquisite melody. On earth, there are small groups that favor fine music, while the multitudes prefer their own regional music. Here, however, it was the opposite. The center of the park was crowded. I had already seen numerous gatherings in the colonies, such as the festival held in our ministry in the honor of the governor, but what I saw in this park exceeded everything that had previously filled me with awe. Yet the brilliance of the scene was not due to the superfluity of excess of any kind, but rather to the artistic blending of simplicity and beauty. The women were exhibited refined elegance and good taste, without any excess which could detract from the divine simplicity. The boughs of great trees, different from those on earth, adorned with lovely, softly lit arbors. Loving couples lingered along the flowery lanes, while groups of ladies and gentlemen animatedly discussed lofty and constructive topics. Although I felt insignificant before that selected assembly, I also felt a silent sympathy from those who glanced at me. I heard parts of discussions concerning this physical sphere, didn't de- didn't detect even the slightest trace of malice or reproach of incarnate men. They discussed love, intellectual culture, scientific research, and constructive philosophy in an atmosphere of understanding and goodwill. without any clash of opinions. I observed that those of greater enlightenment lowered the vibration of their intellectual power, while the less endowed tried to raise theirs. In numerous groups, I could hear references to Jesus and the gospel, but what impressed me most was the prevailing feeling of joy in all of the conversations. Nobody referred to the master with negative vibrations of useless sorrow or unjustified discouragement. They remembered him instead of the supreme instructor of visible and invisible earthly organizations, full of understanding and kindness, but also conscious of the earth and vigilance necessary to preserve order and justice. I was charmed by the optimistic community, which seemed to be the fulfillment of the hopes of many a noble earthly thinker. Although enraptured by the music, I heard Lysias explain, our harmony and structures absorb rays of inspiration in the higher spheres, just as earthly composers are sometimes brought to spiritual planes, such as ours, where they receive melodic expressions. They, in turn, transmit those impressions to human ears after adapting and adorning the themes with their own geniuses. The universe, Andre, is fraught with beauty and sublimity. The eternal and shining rays of life have their origins in God. And at that moment, a graceful group approached us. It was Licinia and her sisters. Lysias put an end to his explanations so that we might welcome them. So I really like this chapter. This was nice in the sense that, you know, it made this really beautiful comparison to music in the spheres and music on earth, which I'm a huge fan of this particular philosophy, the music of the spheres, because and I can get into this in a whole nother video, but my belief system is very much rooted in the fact that God is a singer, God is a performer, a singer in a way, and that the song of God or the voice of God is what keeps things in motion. What creates everything and keeps things in motion. And so whenever I hear or read about stories that have to do with music and how these musics seem to be the cord that ties these different spheres together, it just makes so much sense. It really does. So in this particular case, he talks about this beautiful garden, which is a whole nother thing for me too, because I love flowers. And he talks about how each flower is a master of their own kingdom, and then how you can hear music from these flowery avenues that are in the park. But the purpose is that, in the center of the park, right, where everyone is gathered, the center of the park is where this divine music, this special music gets channeled down, gets brought down from the higher spheres. In the same way that when composers here on earth, the Mozarts, the Beethovens, right, the Bachs, when they're sitting at their piano or when they're sitting in front of their paperwork, it's that same experience of them sort of trancing out and being inspired, if you will, by the muses. And they begin to hear celestial music. Many of these composers have admitted this in their own writings, in their own journals, that their compositions were not something that they created. It was something that they listened to and then replicated. And so it's sort of that same sort of divine channeling, if you will. And I really like that. That's really cool. How much time do we have? 7:48. Geesh. All right. Well, then I guess I will close it to questions and we will start chapter 46 next week. So, are there any questions about tonight's book reading? Let me know. Let me know. I will be waiting. No? All right. Well, good. All right. No news is good news, right? um, but you guys know where to find me, right? You can go to any of the social media sites, website, email. You guys know what to do. Now, if you're coming to these lives and you are hoping to see more engagement, please realize that a lot of that relies heavily on you guys. You know what I mean? So, like, the more you share my content, the more you inform your friends and family of what it is that I do, the likely there's a higher possibility that they will attend and engage, so that you can see more questions and you can feel a little bit more confident about asking questions and things like that, right? Because it takes one person. It just takes one person to have the courage to ask a question or to put a thought out there, and then it gets the ball rolling. So if you want to see more of that, but you yourself, you're not that initiator, um, then share the content. Let people know what we're doing here at the Magical Solutions, so that you can open up that door for those people, you know? Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. This is how we grow.